Hey buddy, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 Yamaha Bolt R Spec. It is a really cool cruiser in that it mixes a lot of very modern technology that you don't always see with a lot of intentionally retro technology to give you that traditional cruiser feel with modern reliability and a bit of a modern performance bent to it. So what we're going to do in this video is go through this bike in detail and talk about some of the differences that make it kind of unique. And let's be honest, we know that this is a competitor to the Harley Sportster. This is something that is slightly different than that, but it certainly gives you that same feel. So what we're going to do is go through this bike and, like I said, talk about the things that make this unique in the modern sense. And if there's something that I leave out that you want to know more about, well, that's why I'm filming here at McLean Sports. They give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup, and if you have a question that I don't get to in this video, but you just want to know an answer to, let me know in the comment section, and if I don't know, I'll make sure I talk to the amazing team here at McLean's, and we'll make sure we get an answer for you, and we'll make future videos on bikes like this to make sure that you have a complete video database and answers in the comments to the questions you want. So do me a favor, if you're interested in this bike, or if that sounds good to you, hit that subscribe button. Let's get going with this review. So when you walk through the showroom, this is a bike that may not stand out to everyone, and Yamaha knows that, so they put a little extra jewelry here and there to hint that this is something special. They also have this bright red paint scheme on the black. It looks super sharp, but overall this is a very traditional bike, and in some cases, if it was just a little bit dusty or dirty, you may not be able to tell the difference between it and an older used bike or even a bike from another brand. What's cool about this is you have a very narrow, small bike feel with a very big 942cc V-twin engine, and for the price of this bike you've really got a big modern V-twin that sort of gives you that retro feel. A lot of bikes in this price class are still parallel twins, or they're not quite the same traditional cruiser feel. Now what you get here is an air-cooled engine, so you've got that, again, simplicity to that, and then you have something that doesn't make a ton of horsepower, but it makes quite a bit of torque, and it makes all of that torque down low from like 2,900, 3,000 RPM right down low, which means it's going to give you that good push that you want to make a very powerful feeling bike. It's also something that is very low slung, has a nice relaxed steering angle, and the point of this bike is to be a cruiser in its truest sense. It is a cruising bike, but it also has a little bit of a sport flair to it. So we're going to go through this bike from front to back, piece by piece, to talk about what makes it unique, what makes it stand out, and help you decide if it's right for you. So one of the things that really appeals to people about cruisers is the fact that they have very low seat heights, and this is no different. So it still has some weight as you pick it up, and again, that's because it has a massive air-cooled engine down here. But overall, when you sit on it, you can see I'm about 6 feet tall. I don't know my exact inseam, but a proportional 6-footer. You can see it's super, super relaxed. So whether you're smaller, whether you're taller, you're gonna fit fine on this bike. And it's a very relaxed, kind of neutral seating position. You can sort of see you've got your legs up here. What's cool about this, though, is again, more of that traditional sort of cruiser thing. A lot of sport bikes, or sort of a lot of bikes, and basically any bike that I've sat on, your knee traditionally sits up against the tank. Here you have a tank that's sculpted back to give you a narrow tank, narrow frame. Your leg actually hits the engine if you try to tuck it into the tank. So you've got the, or sort of at least the airbox out here tucked in there. So you've got some width, some mechanical width in here with the V-twin tucked underneath the engine that just kind of makes it kind of cool. You see a mechanical piece to it as opposed to just plastics everywhere. So overall, seating position is very, very comfortable. The seat is not large. It's not a massive, heavy, big cruiser. So which again, it gives you that feeling like there's just nothing around you, just you in the open road. And again, you have a few different things that are kind of cool. Very light clutch pull. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. Very minimal gauge cluster, which means you have an open road in front of you. One thing that's kind of cool is the tank angles up and the headlights over here. So even though this doesn't have a windshield or anything, you will have a little bit of wind protection just from the mechanical pieces in front of you, things like the headlight, that kind of thing. I'm not saying at all that it's a full coverage bike, but it does have a lot of accessories here, even through the Yamaha catalog, and of course through the aftermarket as well, including quick release windshields, things like that. So you could really make this do anything you want. And the nice thing about cruisers as well is it isn't a surprise to see bags on a cruiser. So you can turn this into an overnight trip, kind of weekend trip kind of bike. And again, that easy torque makes it nice and easy to accelerate. And the other thing you have is the thicker grips that you traditionally have on a cruiser, they're on this bike as well. So even though this appears like a sort of a smaller bike in person, everything about it feels big, from your levers to your grips to the, the engine itself, but still very approachable. All right, let's start at the front, let's work our way back. So taking a look at the front wheel of this motorcycle, you can see some things that start to stand out. And again, I always start with the front wheel of every motorcycle because that tells you the manufacturer's intent of this. So what you have is a large alloy wheel, not spokes. And you have actually little holes through the spokes here, probably for lightweight, that kind of thing. You also have a pedal style single disc here. Now most cruisers are gonna have a single disc, not a dual disc. That's sort of class competitive. And this isn't that much more expensive than other manufacturers' parallel twins. So some of those parallel twins have a more sport bike profile to the front tire, not so here. This is a true cruiser tire, so it's gonna give you a little bit of extra bump absorption. It's gonna give you all the lean angle that you're gonna need on a bike like this, but again, it's not trying to be a overly sport-focused bike. It's not based on other sport-focused bikes. It is a true cruiser, so simple suspension setup here, simple wheels, nice little sort of pedal style disc, a good size disc as well, floating disc there as well. And then we're gonna move our way through the bike and see a couple other little components here. But you can see you're starting off with sort of a traditional cruiser front end. So taking a look at the engine of this bike, I do have my cheat sheet in hand. First of all, let's talk about a few things here. You've got your ignition switch down here underneath the tank, actually fully hidden from view, very traditional cruiser style. And then you can see the massive V-twin engine air cooled there. So no liquid cooling, radiator out front. You've got a traditional bike right here. You've got a little bit of air. Actually, I don't know if that's an air vent or not in there. And then you've got sort of that 2-into-1 exhaust coming out the side for that traditional look. So exhaust only on this side. Big rubber pads here on the foot pegs because you have that V-twin, which is going to give you that rumble. Not so much vibration as rumble. Bump, 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 thump, thump, as opposed to buzz, right? So right away you have that feel. Now there's some things in here that are pretty cool. First of all, air cooled says this is dated and this is old, but again, I'm gonna read through here. You have specifically designed roller rockers activate the valve. So you've got a little bit more of a modern design inside there. And then there's other things in here. Let's see if it's here. Linerless ceramic composite plated cylinder bores. So inside this engine is modern components, modern technology, modern pieces with that traditional look. And what that does is gives you modern day reliability, but also that traditional feel, that traditional thump of the V-twin, and that torque. Like we said, torque is maximum torque at 3,000 RPM, which means you have basically instant torque down low everywhere, great passing power, great acceleration, right from this engine in that traditional feel. So that's really what this is designed for. And then if you look at the tank itself, you've got that classic kind of look. So it's sort of, flat bottom, tank up top. So not a massive tank, but again, that allows you to have that real mechanical feel. We're gonna show you what that bike looks like as we sit on it in a second. Let's work our way over to the seat because there's a couple cool components in there as well. So taking a look at the seat here, again, you have that traditional shape, which you see in the styling. What you don't see here is that this seat is very grippy and it is not a true leather. It's got the nice sort of stitching in there. What that means is it's not gonna get really hot, really sticky. It seems to be sort of more breathable. It has good firmness to the shape. And again, it's a very comfortable seat. And again, it's styled to be a seat. It's not styled to ride into the tank here. Just very traditional. You can see your frame right through there. But again, good, firm but thick padding on there, and again that textile kind of feel is going to give you good grip on there and good comfort. As far as the rear seat goes, typical cruiser, small rear seat. This is a bit more of a single person cruiser. You can take a second person on it, but you're not going to be cruising all day with them on that. I think most people understand that. And then you have a couple things. We're going to talk about the shocks down here, but before we go down there, you have that ability to add your accessories on there. Like I said, throwing little bags on here, making this a day trip bike, making it an overnight bike if you wanted to. Lots of options to do that through the accessories catalog. Let's take a look at the shocks though, because that's a piece that kind of stands out here. So taking a look at the rear shocks here, you can see sort of the bling that Yamaha has put onto this bike. Now, a lot of people get caught up in travel here. Cruisers don't have a ton of travel. What's interesting about this is you have sort of a sport performance kind of piece here, but truly a sport performance bike would have a mono shock mounted kind of in the center. You still have dual shocks, so there's one on this side, one on the other side, and they are preload adjustable. So if you're gonna adjust your preload, you wanna keep them equal both sides there. But what's interesting is you have that piggyback shock. Now, why would you have a piggyback shock? Well, a lot of performance vehicles have that. And again, as this is compressing and going in and out, you're creating some heat. So it's taking that hot oil, putting it over here, and what that does is it keeps a really consistent suspension feel and suspension activity on this bike. So consistency is a key. So while it has not a ton of suspension travel, it's actually probably more important on a cruiser to have this kind of setup, because when you've got so much travel, you've got some room for error kind of thing, but having a smaller suspension travel that's again typical of cruisers. I'm not knocking this, but compared to an adventure bike where you traditionally see something like this, or a high-end sport bike, you still have all of that travel, that the little bit of travel you have is very consistent, very very good. No matter how bumpy the roads get, you're going to have the right amount of feel to it the whole way through. Down the back, you can see a large rear brake here as well. The reason you have a larger brake is a little more weight in the cruiser. It's going to have a little more rear wheel braking than some of the other bikes, different style type bikes. So you have large brakes and great suspension. And again, the same thing is on the other side, and it is a dual shock type thing. And again, that adjustability for 5 preload adjustments in there to make it feel exactly the way you need to, or if you're loading it up with passengers or cargo, you can really set it up exactly the way you need it to be. Taking a look at the rear of the bike, you have a couple cool things here. First of all, this standard light here looks like an aftermarket LED, and there's incandescent signal lights, LED tail light here. There is belt drive there, so you have maintenance-free, sort of a clean system, which is kind of nice to have. But let me just show you these lights here. Again, filming lights never works perfectly, but you can see when I turn the bike on, you do have a fairly bright tail light. Brake light, of course, shines really bright. And then you have the signals. No real point here to pointing these out, except that it is worth noting that you do have self-canceling signals on this bike, which is something that is pretty rare for certainly the price class. But again, it gives you that sort of high-end bike feel, a little bit modern pieces to your not as modern feel. So it's, again, really good mix of modern and retro style and modern retro pieces in this bike. Taking a look at the dash of this bike, again, a little bit more of that modern and retro feel again. So I'm going to turn that key back on there. And you can see there is a display screen in here, but it's not a TFT display or anything like that. So again, kind of that in-between modern and retro. We can zoom in there. Actually, let's zoom in one more time to get a nice clear view. So you can see it's sort of a segmented piece there to give you all the information you need for speedometer and everything else. And then there's no buttons on this section here. So what you do have is on the throttle side, you have a selection switch to go from your odometer there. You can see trip 1, trip 2, whoops, if I hit it again, trip 2, and then clock, and that's it. So just the basics, that's all you need. What is kind of cool is when you feel in behind here with my fingers, you can feel that sort of rubber mounted. Again, this is going to give that vibey feel of a V-twin engine, but all of the components themselves have to continue to work, have to continue to be dampened in this case. So again, it's all ready for that vibey feel, to give you that traditional feel without having to give you excessive vibration of things, so it's always legible. Now let's show you the controls. Let's see if we can do that in one shot as we move over to the controls. Again, pretty standard stuff here. The way the linkage is set up, so there's no slipper and assist clutch. Normally on a sport bike, the way you would make a clutch feel lighter is a slipper and assist clutch. That's more of a performance thing, which also does benefit new riders. But you have a meaty clutch feel, but a very true clutch feel, but it's really not that heavy. Again, big 942cc engine. You got a lot of mechanical components in here. Big meaty lever here, but fairly light clutch lever. And then you just have high beam, low beam signals, which we mentioned, they're self-canceling. And then you have have the horn down there. Didn't mean to hit that. Nice and easy to hit that. Let's come across over here to the other side and take a look at your simple controls on this side. Again, throttle side, again, nice meaty grip there. So you've got your start button down there, your kill switch up top, and then in here is the selection switch, which I was using to switch between the trip A, trip B, and then down there is just the reset switch. So again, very simple controls, enough to give you what you need, but nothing to be, if you don't want that modern new stuff, TFT displays, tons of drive modes, stuff like that, all simple stuff down here. I do want to point out the face of this bike as well. I want to say, first of all, that the angle I'm shooting at and just the way the camera grasps these incandescent signal lights, which of course are your running lights, they are very, very bright, very easy to see. They really stand out, but the color of them is much more amber than what you're seeing on the camera here. So you do have something that makes you stand out on the road, which is nice. What's interesting is they went with the incandescent headlight here as opposed to something like an LED. I kind of agree with that because that gives you that classic look. Normally I'm a big fan of the LED, but again, they're going with some of that classic style here, so you really end up getting that. But the most important light in the back, that instant on brake light, is really bright. All the lights on this bike are actually very bright and very, very legible. very visible. I haven't used the headlight, obviously I have to turn it on and run it. We're not gonna run it in here in the shop today, but we'll have it out in the future in future videos there. So just so you know, incandescent headlight, incandescent signals, and then just an LED tail light. So let's talk about who this bike is for. Now, first of all, it's not for me. I'm the kind of person who likes something that's a little bit more sporty riding or a little bit more adventure orientated. But my very first bike was a cruiser, and one of the things I love about cruisers is how versatile they are. So first of all, this one being a large engine with lots of torque, you can ride it all day. It gives you that true vibey V-twin feel with that air-cooled engine. You know, it's not something that's highly stressed, so they're not trying to pull out the maximum amount of horsepower in this engine, but they still give you a lot of torque. And I think that all plays into the reason you would buy this bike. First of all, it's a pretty good value for what it is as far as a traditional cruiser with good rideability, but it's also something that gives you all of the reliability of a Yamaha with the reliability of modern pieces and components that you don't always see, without sacrificing any of that retro or any of that sort of traditional vintage kind of feel. And that makes it really unique and really kind of appeals to me. I love the piggyback shocks here. Again, it makes so much sense. When you have less travel, you're using more of your suspension travel to do the same thing. If you have an adventure bike with 8 inches of travel, you're only using a little bit of that suspension travel on the road. You really don't need piggyback shocks for anything. But when you're using a good portion of your travel every day, throwing the piggyback shocks on is going to give you that modern feel. So yes, that gives you that bling, but it also makes it really practical. But again, back to that engine, V-twin feel, good power, good torque. Every one of the controls, everything you see and touch on this bike feels retro, and you're not getting that other brand, which you would have to buy used to be in this price point. So again, it's not a Harley Sportster, but it gives you, in my opinion, a better option where you know you can buy new. You don't have to worry if did the last guy do oil changes, did the last guy maintain it. You've got something here that's pretty special, and again, very good reliability. So what I see in this bike is something that really is retro in all the right ways for the typical buyer. Again, low seat height, but that still meaty feel. It's not a super lightweight bike, but still very manageable. But not lightweightness of it makes it feel traditional, and that's what I love about it. Literally, there's only one thing I don't think is very good about this bike, and that's the mirror location. The mirrors just go right into my arms. I think you'd want to do something off the end or do something out like that. Everything else about this bike, again, for what they're trying to do with it, I think they really nail it. So there you go, there's my review of the Yamaha Bolt R Spec. This is the 2024 model. Again, it's here at McLean's right now, available for you to take home early March 2024. If you have questions that I didn't cover, let me know. If we can take this out sometime in the future, we'll be able to do that as well, do a riding review, stuff like that. But we're gonna dig into these bikes throughout the year, so make sure you subscribe if you're interested in all of them. We're gonna cover the whole Yamaha line, the Suzuki line, the KTM line, and a whole bunch more. All those ones that I just mentioned are right here at McLean's. Next up, we're gonna talk about the R1 in my next video. So that's an interesting video as well. Stay tuned, make sure you subscribe, and we'll talk to you in the next one.